So this is going to be a Q&A panel. We have about 20 minutes, I believe, and then 20 minutes for Q&A from the audience. Right? Okay. So I guess I have to ask you first. You know what? May I just first ask all of you? You heard a very, you heard President Zelensky talk about the death of Alexei Navalny and how this has been a warning or a sign to all of you sitting here as this very important conference opens. Can I just get you, Senator, to comment on the death of Navalny and what signal do you think Russia is sending the world?
Well, first of all, our thoughts and prayers go out to the family on this tragedy. And it just reemphasizes that Vladimir Putin's a dictator, that dictators don't know any rules, and that is why it's important that we remember that NATO is here to protect our collective security against dictators like Vladimir Putin.
And just before I go to the Prime Minister, does it sharpen your intent to do more to support Ukraine? As President Zelensky said, it's Navalny one day, it's Ukraine, and the rest of Europe the next day.
Well, I think Putin's invasion of Ukraine demonstrated what his intentions are. I don't know that this changes our perception of Putin. We always knew he was a bad guy, and this just reinforces what we already knew.
I'll get back to the bill for aid in a moment. Prime Minister Kallas, you are literally on the front line. You have been very strong in, needing to maintain a credible defense and deterrence. What is your reaction to the death of Navalny and what it might mean in a bigger way?
Well, it shows that Putin's playbook hasn't changed. I mean, this is the way he operates. This is the dictator's handbook in real life. So we should be all aware of this. And like President Zelensky said, let's not discuss to do something. We have to do everything to stop him because history rhymes. We have seen this already in 1930s. The same thing. I mean, American isolationism, on the one side, this not stopping the aggressor when we have the chance to stop him, and then seeing aggression spread all over the world. Let's do the right thing. Let's learn something from the history.
Mm-hmm. And just to frame it a little differently for you, Secretary General, NATO has said, and actually key defense ministers from the frontline countries have said that you are concerned for the first time, this wasn't the case last year, that within 3 to 5 years even, Putin could test the resolve of a NATO country.
We can never take peace for granted, but I think it is important to convey that we don't see any imminent threat against any NATO ally. The world has become more dangerous, but NATO has become stronger. And the purpose of NATO is to prevent war. It's to ensure that there is no room in Moscow for any miscalculation about NATO's readiness and resolve to protect all allies, and to make it clear that an attack on one ally will trigger a response from the whole alliance. And as long as we convey that message clearly to Moscow, no ally will be attacked. So our deterrence remains credible, and therefore we don't see any military threat against any NATO ally.
Our focus should not drift from helping Ukraine militarily, because we don't have to talk about any NATO country if we stop Putin in Ukraine. And that's why we should concentrate our efforts that he stopped there.
Okay, so what is it going to take? You have heard President Zelensky lay out what he needs. We'll get back to the NATO track in a second, but just in terms of anti-air defenses, artillery, long range, all the stuff that they need, they don't have the wherewithal to control the skies or to stop, the bombers from Russia. But Senator Ricketts, this is now depending on the United States. Europe has done its bit. When everybody said we're not going to, pass this bill, Europe stepped up $50 billion worth of other material to Ukraine. When is the United States going to do what the United States pledged to do at the beginning of this war? That is, defend democracy, make sure tyranny and dictatorship doesn't win.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm going to respectfully disagree with you. Europe still needs to do more, right? So as of last summer, only 11 of the NATO allies were reaching the 2% GDP spending. So that still needs to be done, and I certainly applaud what Germany's doing to get there, hopefully this year, right, to get to that 2%. But there's still many of the European allies that need to get that done. With regard to the United States, look, we're democracies. Democracy is messy. And it takes time and a process to get there. Every country has their own thing. So, for example, I just mentioned, the Europeans haven't gotten to the 2% yet. So, but that's probably because of the internal politics in each of those different countries, right? So it takes time to bring democracies along. And the same thing is going to happen in the United States. We will get there with regard to making the investments in our defense industrial base, supply the weapons to Ukraine. But it's going to take time to get there. There may be different paths to get there. I'm reminded of Winston Churchill's quote, "Americans will do the right thing after exhausting all other possibilities." So I do think we will get there. It's just democracies take time to process.
So the 2 points I'd like to follow up on. Is there enough time for this, as you say, messy democratic process? And then I'd be interested to hear from the two Europeans here what Senator Angus King told me the other day on my program, that actually the United States is 15th in terms of defense spending for its GDP. And other European countries are spending more, relatively frankly. Not all of them, and I know you want them to get all to the 2%, but a lot of them are. And I guess, Senator, that's something that you should all take into consideration too, right? And wonder whether the United States, or do you have an answer to the consequence of Russia winning, of Putin winning?
Well, I absolutely believe, just as the Prime Minister was saying, that if Putin wins in Ukraine, he won't stop there. He's a dictator. Dictators behave the same way, which is they tell you what they're going to do, and he's talked about a greater Russia. He's talked about Russians living outside of Russia. There's no doubt that the Baltic states are going to be at risk, or Poland, if we don't stop him in Ukraine. And the other thing we should also remember is the geography is not going to change. When he loses in Ukraine, he's still going to be a threat and a danger. And that's why we are going to have to continue to bolster our eastern flank, and NATO is doing that right now. So I think that's part of what we have to do, is make sure that we stop him here in Ukraine. And part of also what we need to do, not just in the United States, but in all of our countries, is make sure we're reminding our publics, because we've seen decreasing support in the United States for Ukraine, reminding them how important it is that we stop Putin here, and really getting that message out, building that support to be able to get the weapons that Ukraine's going to need to continue to fight.
Can I just ask you to pick up on the progress that NATO nations are making in what you're all demanding for more defense spending?
In 2014, NATO made a very important decisions triggered by Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea, and that was that NATO allies, after years of reducing defense spending, we had to start to increase defense spending, and that was at the Wales summit, a NATO summit in Wales. I remember I was there. And I thought this was just another pledge by politicians made at the international meeting, and not so much was going to happen. The reality is that a lot has happened, because since then all NATO allies have increased defense spending. This year we expect 18 allies to meet the 2% guideline, spend 2% of GDP on defense. And that's up from 3 in 2014. That's a significant increase. Meaning also that in total, European allies and Canada have added 600 billion extra for defense, and those allies which are not yet at 2% have plans in place to be there very soon. So there is an enormous difference, and the European allies have really stepped up because they realize that there is a need to invest in high-end capabilities, have more readiness of their forces, and NATO has implemented the biggest reinforcement of collective defense in generations, with battle groups, combat-ready troops in the eastern part of the alliance for the first time in our history, with high readiness, more forces, and now total new defense plan. So I'm not saying everything is fine. I agree that Europeans have to do even more, but we're really on track to something which is demonstrating a commitment of all allies that we need to stand together.
Prime Minister Kallas, you heard the senator say that America will eventually do the right thing in this case. The CIA director has said for the United States to walk away from the conflict in Ukraine at this crucial moment and cut off support to Ukraine would be an own goal of historic proportions. Do you feel, as the atmosphere has been around the beginning of this conference, that there's a worry about America continuing to lead the alliance wanting to be the leader, particularly if the administration changes after the elections? Is that a real anxiety or not?
I mean, first of all, I want to just correct one thing that I hear everywhere. It is mentioning separately Baltics and Poland. I mean, it is like we are second-class NATO members. They are all equal NATO members. When Russia is going to attack, NATO is going to attack all of us, not Poland, not the Baltics. So let's not make that distinction there. Then, Second, I think that, of course, we are all democracies, and democracies, we don't get to choose the leaders for our allies, and we have to work with all the allies. What we have to understand is to learn from the mistakes from the history, and one thing for Europe. I was just in one of the Central European countries, and they had the attitude that, the war is far from them. And I took the exact geographical kilometers, the distances. I mean, you're much closer to the war than we are. And we should all be worried. And so it is true that we have to ramp up our defense spending and do it not only political pledges, but actually in real life. So in Estonia, we have invested or are investing over 3% of our GDP to defense, and we encourage everybody to do so. But there's also one thing that I've thought about, and this is that, when I came up with the proposal or the 1 million rounds artillery initiative for Ukraine, then it turned out that, our defense industry is not capable and we don't have enough. So, but we have in Estonia, for example, a very, vibrant tech sector. So why don't we put those tech sector and defense industry together to make, a really big progress, not producing what, was there for the 20th century, but actually what should be in the 21st century, so that we could make advantage by this technological part also in the in the defense industry. So I think there is so much we can do all together, and together with the big allies, the small ones, everybody brings something to the table. That is what the alliance is all about.
Secretary General, Prime Minister Kallas talked about the 1 billion, right? 1 billion ammunition rounds.
1 million.
1 million?
Million.
Okay, well, at the moment, US intelligence says that while you can't deliver even 1 million, North Korea is busy delivering maybe 500 million to Russia right now. Is that right?
No, I think it's a million also from North Korea.
Fine, well, okay, so he's getting what he needs.
Yeah.
Can you today be certain that NATO can defeat Russia, if it comes to that? Because all we're hearing is that you're not ramped up enough. You don't have enough to do what you need to do in Ukraine, much less if you were to confront Russia. And you've said that if he steps on your territory, every single inch will be defended.
NATO is the strongest military power in the world today. We represent 50% roughly of the world's total military might, and military we are stronger than Russia. But at the same time, I think the war in Ukraine has demonstrated that there are some serious gaps. For instance, when it comes to sustainment, one thing is to have all the advanced weapon systems, but they need spare parts, they need maintenance, and not least they need ammunition. And in the beginning of the war in Ukraine, we depleted our stocks, but now they are running quite low. So now we are focusing extremely, also very much on how to ramp up production. We have some good news. There are new factories being set up, production has increased, but there's urgent need to do more. So yes, I think we all have learned some serious lessons about warfare, also for NATO from the war in Ukraine. Then, of course, I was speaking about burden sharing. European allies have more to do when it comes to total defense spending, but actually, when you look at support for Ukraine, European allies and Canada have provided more support to Ukraine in total than the United States. And of course, the United States have done a lot, particularly when it comes to military support to Ukraine. But the problem now is, of course, the lack of decision in the US Congress means that the flow from the US has gone down, and that has a direct impact on the front line in Ukraine. So, of course, this is not only about making the right decision, but it's about making the right decision early, as quickly as possible, because it's urgent. Every week we wait means that there will be more people killed on the front line in Ukraine. So it's not for me to give advice on how to pass legislation through the US Congress, but what I can say is the vital and urgent need for the US to decide on a package for Ukraine, because we need that support, and we have a burden sharing between Europe and Canada and the United States, so now it's for the US to deliver what they have promised.
And you just took that message to Washington last week, and Chancellor Scholz went, and he's just broken ground on a new ammunition factory. So let me turn to you again then, Senator Ricketts. You voted against the Senate plan. I wonder whether anything you've heard today may maybe stiffen your resolve to go and convince your colleagues, not just in the Senate but in the House, and particularly what President Zelensky said, that he would really request all these weapon systems if he could directly address. And you heard, in answer to a question, that he would even invite former President Donald Trump to the front line so he could see the danger and see what's going on. Does anything you hear today stiffen your resolve, change your mind?
Well, I think, again, it goes back to democracies are messy and every country has its priorities. So, for example, in the United States right now, we have a pressing national security issue at our southern border. Over the course of the last 3 years, 8.5 million people have either entered our country illegally or attempted to enter our country illegally. Put in that perspective, that's more than 4 times the population of my state. And that's the number one consideration for people in my state, and frankly across the United States, is what's going on at our southern border. And so that's what my colleagues and I were attempting to do when we were trying to pass this bill, is to get a package that would secure the border, force President Biden to change his policy to secure the border. Ultimately, we were not successful. Doesn't mean I don't support what we're doing to support Ukraine. But again, it gets back to every country's got its own policies and its priorities, getting back to, again, the why, since 2014, the floor was supposed to be 2%, and here we are last year in 2023, almost 10 years later, now 2024, and we're going to have either 11 last year or maybe 18 this year. Countries have their priorities that they have to get there. Democracy is messy.
Do you accept, though, Senator, that actually the administration came to a very conservative and very conservative and strict immigration proposal based on what the Congress wanted, and it's Congress who torpedoed it, the Republican-led Congress? I talked to Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, yesterday, who said he'd never seen anything from the Democrats so strong. So my question to you is, and we know that the American people, by a considerable poll margin, support NATO. The Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk tweeted, "Dear Republican senators of America, Ronald Reagan, who helped millions of us to win back our freedom and independence, must be turning in his grave to you today. I'm sorry to add," he said, "shame on you." So I wonder what you think about that, and whether you are prepared to see a world in which America doesn't lead anymore, or one, I asked you before, in which Russia wins.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm actually going to say what the administration came forward with on the border was not adequate, didn't get the job done. They set the emergency level at 5,000 people per day entering our country. In the past, that number was below 1,000, and in fact, Brandon Judd, who's the president of the Border Patrol Council, who's on the border there, said 1,000's emergency, 5,000's a catastrophe. So again, that's why the bill didn't go anywhere, is because what the president was willing to do was not adequate. With regard to, again, I understand people are anxious to get this done. It is a democracy. It does take time, and we have other issues that we got to deal with as well. So, as I mentioned, we're going to get there. It's going to take time. Democracy is a process, and we just have to continue to work to be able to get to the answer for how we're going to invest in our defense industrial base, how we're going to supply Ukraine the weapons they need to be able to do it. But I'm confident the United States will get there.
Okay. So they're going to get there.
Yeah, but it is that time is working in favor of Putin, of course. So against the rules-based order, really. So of course everybody is looking at United States also to speed up the process. I understand, democracy takes time. You have debates. but at the same time, there is a lot at stake, I think, in the world. Again, I turn back to history, and I think three things we learned from the 1930s and the Second World War was that first, everything spreads very fast in Europe. The second is that if America isolates itself, it eventually is going to cost you more. And the third is that if aggression pays off somewhere, it serves as an invitation to use it elsewhere, which is a threat to the global security.
Senator Ricketts, Prime Minister Kallas, Secretary General Stoltenberg, thank you very much. Now opening it to the audience for questions, and I understand China, many other issues are on your agenda this weekend. I saw you first. And questions, not speeches.
Alexei Goncharenko, member of the Parliament of Ukraine. Dear Senator, you said democracy takes time. The problem is Ukraine does not have time. We are dying every day. And that is so important. So please consider it. And one more message. You asked President Zelensky a message to Republicans. My message is very easy. First message is, do you really want to have Afghanistan, one more? And that will be a consequence. Second, if it will be needed, who will be with Americans in trenches near Tehran? Ukrainians are ready, but please support us now. And the last thing, as a President of Committee on Migration and Refugees of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, we are ready to help you with the border. We are ready to help you too. But do you really think that if Ukraine would fail, that will help American border? Thank you.
Was there a rule against speeches versus questions? So understand your frustration coming from Ukraine. Absolutely. Your country's being invaded. You've got 300,000 Russian soldiers on your territory. Put it in perspective of, again, the millions of people trying to come into the United States illegally. Not quite the same thing, but it's a pressing issue for our country. But it's a pressing issue for the United States, the people of the United States, right? So again, when you're talking about dealing with multiple issues, you've got to be able to manage this all. Ukraine's got its own political issues. You're looking at, for example, your conscription, taking it down from 27 to 25. I understand it's a difficult political issue in Ukraine right now as well. So I think, again, we all have to have a little grace. We're all democracies. So we have to understand that getting our populations to where we need to be is a matter of time, and process matters. And so it's what sets us apart from the bad guys like Putin, that we just can't order people to do stuff, right? So certainly understand Ukrainians saying, hey, we need the assistance now. I get it. It takes time to work its way through a democracy, and that's what we're working through. We're going to get there. It's just going to take time.
For you? Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'm Tytti Tuppurainen, Finland, former minister in Sanna Marin's government. It's clear that Europe needs a credible and strong deterrence, looking at Ukraine and beyond. Chancellor Scholz pointed that out earlier this morning. Do you think that we can achieve that by conventional means only? Or is it timely to discuss a European nuclear weapon as it is being discussed currently in Germany? What are the expectations, especially across the Atlantic?
Secretary General?
Well, NATO has a well-established nuclear deterrent. It has worked for decades. It's something the United States does together with European allies. We have agreed command and control, we have exercises, we have doctrines, and it is actually something we do together as NATO. And I think that any questioning of that deterrent will only undermine NATO in a time where we really need credible deterrence. So of course, we have the United States as a nuclear power, we have France and UK, but the idea of developing some kind of parallel joint nuclear deterrent among some NATO allies, not including the United States, and presumably then not UK either, that's not helpful, and it will only undermine a nuclear deterrent that has worked well for many, many years.
Over there.
Thank you very much indeed. Tobias Elwood, United Kingdom Parliament, former Foreign Minister. Senator, I understand this is the biggest delegation for the United States for generations to come to Munich, and that's really good to see. I hope the message goes back that part of Europe is on fire, the lines on the map are being redrawn, and we are absolutely baffled as to how this is being tied in with what's going on the Mexican border. My question, if I may, is to do with standardization of NATO rounds. Because if you take a howitzer from the United States and you put it with the munitions from Estonia, as Ukraine found, it won't work. Yeah. And we need to be building more artillery pieces and shells as well. But until we standardize this equipment, it simply won't happen. Surely that must be a priority for NATO. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And the good news is that, again, we have learned some very serious lessons from the war in Ukraine. It's not only Estonian howitzers or ammunition from the US that doesn't work together. It's also, we have a joint Dutch-German brigade where they discovered exactly the same. So we have too many examples where allies have made some small changes in NATO standards, partly, I guess, to protect their own industry. And this doesn't work. So therefore, we have done a lot in NATO to actually reinforce and to implement the agreed NATO standards. This will reduce costs and it will ensure interoperability and also that weapons and ammunition are interchangeable.
There was this lady here.
Thank you very much. My name is Lynn Kwok, and I'm transitioning to a think tank in Washington, D.C. My question is directed to the Senator. Senator, under both the former Trump administration as well as the current Biden administration, the Indo-Pacific has been identified as the priority area for the United States and China the main challenge. How do you think a sluggish approach to Ukraine might impact on these foreign policy priorities and challenges? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's no doubt that Xi is also a dictator, and he has his own territorial ambitions in Taiwan. And so we know that Xi is watching very closely what's going on in Ukraine, which is, again, one of the reasons why it is important that we support Ukraine, give them the weapons they need, and then also work with Taiwan to make sure that they've got the weapons they need to be able to deter Xi from trying to take Taiwan by force. So we absolutely get this is all interrelated, which is one of the reasons why I think it's important that NATO establish some of the relationships we have with regard to our Indo-Pacific partners like Korea and Japan and so forth. I'm supportive of trying to set up a NATO office in Tokyo so we can really open up those lines of communications and keep it very coordinated. I absolutely believe that what happens in the Indo-Pacific impacts Europe and vice versa. And that's why I think that, again, for our collective defense, we need to be thinking, NATO's got its own mission, but extending those lines of communication and cooperation is going to be important to be able to deter Xi from taking Taiwan in the future.
Can I just add a question to you about this, to both of you actually, because you've been using China more and more in your arguments to US lawmakers, and others have told us that they're watching, Iran's watching, China's watching, everybody's watching what happens on the battlefield of Ukraine. And others have suggested that there is actually a new axis of anti-American nations, Iran, North Korea, Russia, joining to really challenge the United States. I'd like to hear your view on that and then your answer on that.
I think we have to remember that just a few days before the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine back in 2022, President Putin went to Beijing and he signed an agreement with President Xi where they promised each other a partnership without any limits. And what we see is that China and Russia are coming closer and closer. So, of course, if President Putin wins in Ukraine, it's not only a tragedy for the Ukrainians, but it sends a message not only to Putin, but also to Xi, that when they use military force, they get what they want. So what happens in Ukraine today can happen in Taiwan tomorrow. And therefore, I strongly believe that it's a good deal for the United States to support Ukraine. It's not charity, it's investment in their own security. Because it makes it less likely that Xi uses forces, for instance, against Taiwan, but also because by spending a fraction of the US defense budget, together with European allies, we have enabled the Ukrainians to destroy a substantial part of Russian fighting power. So this is actually in our interest to ensure that Putin doesn't win, not least because we are concerned about what China may learn if he wins in Ukraine. So therefore it's urgent that the US make a decision on continued support to Ukraine.
Do you have an answer? I know you talked a little bit about China, but do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, I would agree with the Secretary General here. I think the world is polarizing between these authoritarian dictators, Putin, Xi, Khomeini in Iran, Kim Jong-un in North Korea. They are the ones who are trying to upend the system that we've created since World War II that has led to all this peace and prosperity. They're trying to change that. And that's where it's up to us in the world that we see these liberal values that are so important, that we have these democracies that allow our people to get that peace and prosperity, to work together to oppose that. And it's going to be for a while. The world has changed. You know, the peace that we've had since the Soviet Union collapsed in the 1990s, that's gone. Yeah. It's going to be a very dangerous world the next 10 or 20 years. And that's why it's important that we beef up our defenses. And during the Cold War, Europe regularly spent over 3% on their GDP. We in the United States have to look at the same thing. You know, our defense budget, at least the Biden administration's defense budget, looked to fall below 3%. We need to get that back up. And then we also, again, getting back to, we need to talk to our people about what's happening and why it's so important, because they haven't lived in a world where we've had a situation like this since the 1990s. Right. I was talking to a mother at my state fair. She said, "Senator, I don't want my 18-year-old fighting in Europe." And I said, "Ma'am, that's why we're giving Ukraine weapons, so that doesn't happen. Because if Ukraine loses and Putin invades one of our NATO allies, then your 18-year-old will be fighting in Europe." That message hasn't been out there in a long, long time. We've got to get our folks, our peoples all across these nations to understand the world has changed, and we're going to have to step up to fight these dictators.
One last last word to you, Kaja Kallas.
Yeah. Just thought about your migration worry. In comparison, we have 6% of our population now Ukrainian refugees. That would be, calculating into America, that would be 20 million people. So we survive. You will, I guess, survive as well. But what I wanted to say about Europe and America, I think it's also important to understand that majority of investments that come to America are from Europe. 45 states out of 50 are dependent on the European job creation or the export-import relations, the trade relations. Then it is more. I mean, 2.7 times the American companies profit from Europe more than they do in Asia, whole of Asia. So if you think in this kind of what's in it for us terms, then Europe is definitely profitable for you, and that's why the US definitely has to see this how this is affecting you as well when there is a war in Europe.
I'm sorry, I'm being told it's the end of the session. Thank you all very much, Secretary General, Prime Minister, Senator. Thank you very much. Thank you.